بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our lessons on the fiqh of marriage, a concise summary. We stopped last week in the discussion of the khitbah, the proposal, and the process, and how that is done in Islamically. So now we'll go from the end of that process towards discussion of marriage conditions and the mahar, the dowry. So before we go there, 3.11, what are the signs of a good proposal? So we stopped last week in the discussion that once somebody has finished proposing and that meeting has been done, both parties were able to see one another, speak about the marriage and about important questions, about their personality, worldview, etc. They're now in the decision-making process. And we said then after that, they follow the steps as we mentioned last week about the istikhara and istishara and etc. etc. Now we come to 3.11, signs of a good proposal. Now, it's a decision of the woman to accept or reject the suitor, the khatib. And that's because from the conditions of the aqd al-nikah, the marriage contract, is the acceptance or the pleasure and agreement of the woman as well as the man. So it's not allowed for anyone to force a woman into marriage, for that will be invalid. Just as it's not allowed for anyone to deny her from that which she wants. So the decision is up to her and her wali. Her guardian will be discussing with her based on what he has also observed, and they come to an agreement. But what is a sign that the khitbah went well, the proposal went well? Hadith Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she narrates the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, إِنَّ مِن يُمْنِ الْمَرْأَةِ تَيْسِيرُ خِطْبَتِهَا وَتَيْسِيرُ صَدَاقِهَا وَتَيْسِيرُ رَحِمِهَا. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Aisha reports him as he sallallahu alayhi wasallam as saying, from the blessings of a woman, is the easiness or ease in her proposal, easiness in her mahar, and easiness that is found in her giving birth. So again, from the blessings of a woman is that her proposal, her mahar, and her giving birth are all made easy. Hadith Sahih al-Jami', Hadith number 2235, authenticated by Imam al-Albani, and also Shu'ayb al-Rault authenticated the Hadith in his verification of Musnad Imam Ahmad. So this Hadith teaches us that if the proposal went well, it went easy, that's a sign that it was a good khitbah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, by Allah's permission. Now what is that intended? How do you know it was easygoing or successful? Imam al-Munawi, rahimahullah, commenting on this hadith, he says that at the beginning the hadith says that from the blessings of a woman, يعني إِنَّ مِن يُمْنِ الْمَرْأَةِ, yumni here means her blessings, is تَيْسِيرُ خِطْبَتِهَا, is easiness of her, found in her proposal. He means ease for the suitor, for the one who is proposing, to ask for her hand in marriage from her guardians, and that their response, i.e. the response of the guardians of the woman, the response of the woman and her guardians is easy without any delay. Allahumma barak. Without any delay. That's a good sign. They accept immediately or quickly, because they found that the person who is proposing is qualified or is a good match. Then he continues, the hadith says, وَتَيْسِيرُ صَدَاقِهَا, and easiness found in her dowry. And we're going to get to the mahar soon. But that means that it's not severe, it's not large in amount. And the dowry being present or already being present in the hand of the suitor, or the fact that it's not difficult for him to obtain it. Yani a good mahar, a good sadaq, is the one which is easy for the suitor, the khatib, to provide for the woman after they agreed upon it. Not the one that is excessive and requires a lot of ta'ab, difficulty to find or obtain, and this is a problem that we may find in our society. And the last part of the hadith, وَتَيْسِيرُ رَحِمِهَا, which means easiness in her womb, or in her, literally her giving birth. And Munawi says, rahimahullah, in giving birth, in that she is quick to give birth and increase the lineage, i.e. she has many children. And we spoke about that as a quality that is praiseworthy for a woman. Now, with that, all this being said, somebody now may ask, these signs are signs that something is, or that the proposal went well, and that the marriage is blessed. And the opposite is true. That if these signs are absent, it's a sign of concern. Not to say that the person who, if he got married or was getting married, things were a little bit difficult. That doesn't mean that if there were some challenges, that it was a wrong thing. Rather, we say that this is inshallah a blessing of the woman, to show that the woman is a good woman, the family is a good family, and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed this union. That's what the hadith is telling us. Because some may understand the hadith incorrectly and say then that if I found difficulty in the process, then that means there's no barakah. No, it doesn't necessitate that. But we do need to be careful of the fact that we don't make the process difficult. And Islam, this is dalil that in Islam encourages ease when it comes to this process of marriage because of the khayr that comes from it. And excessiveness in mahar, excessiveness in pickiness in choosing or making difficult for the people proposing, the men, or the difficulty that may come from the wali, or difficulty when it comes to anything regarding the marriage, it's not a good sign. It's very important that a person understands that, because unfortunately this is the reality many people are witnessing in our times. We witness this a lot. Challenges being made in that which is halal, and the haram being made easy. And a'udhu billah min dhalik. And that's why it's important for those involved in the process to be easygoing. Yes, to know what they want. Yes, to be reasonable. Yes, to be Islamic. But if the things are good, to make it easy. It's important. Now, moving along, we'll move to 4.0, which is to do with, or point 4, or section 4, conditions of the mahar. Conditions of the mahar. And here, what is the conditions of the mahar? Conditions of the marriage. Conditions of the marriage. What does that mean? It means that if the woman or the man have conditions which they want to stipulate in order for this nikah to be valid, i.e. they want to present this as things that they want, it is permissible to do so. It's permissible to do so and obligatory to fulfill them once agreed upon. It's very important if there are conditions being made. Because it's not necessary that they have conditions that they agree on prior to it. But if they do, then they have to be fulfilled. Because the hadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ أَحَقَّ الشُّرُوطِ أَنْ يُوَفَّى بِهِ مَا اسْتَحْلَلْتُمْ بِهِ الْفُرُوجِ. That the conditions that are most deserving of fulfillment are those by which the private parts, i.e. both parties, are made permissible. I.e. the conditions which are agreed upon prior to the marriage, which then they accept, to which then they got married, i.e. and the private parts became permissible for one another. واضح? So here, what did the ulama say about these kind of conditions? So we'll read from Shaykh Salih Fawzan's book, the Fiqh summary, in the chapter, Conditions Made Before Marriage. So this is volume 2, page 379 of his book. It's in English as well. There the Shaykh, he says that they are conditions set in the marriage contract by one of the two spouses to be fulfilled by the other in the best interest of the former. And they are stipulated whether through the marriage contract or any previous agreement. Such conditions are of two types. So here, it's not a must for the validity of the marriage that they be marriage conditions. But let's say one of the two parties or both parties have certain things that they want to fulfilled in order for their marriage to go, because they know what they want and they know what they need. And they stipulate it out of fear that it may not be fulfilled otherwise. It is permissible for them. And this can be stipulated in the contract itself, or it can be stipulated before that. There are two types of conditions. One are valid conditions, and the second are invalid. So valid conditions are conditions, the Shaykh says, according to the majority of the fuqaha, the faqihs, the jurists, it is valid. Is a valid condition is when a woman stipulates that a suitor must divorce. Now he gives examples. So he says now, some examples. One of them have to do with things somebody wants before the marriage. Another one has to do with things that the wife wants for the marriage. And others can do with things that the wife wants after the marriage. The idea is, the valid conditions are those which the Sharia hasn't prohibited. The Shaykh gives the examples, and we'll mention just one of them, because there's a lot of speech here. Example is that the woman, she stipulates upon her husband that he cannot remarry, i.e. marry a second wife, or a third, or the likes, or fourth, while she's married to him. And this is very common, we find nowadays this discussion. The fuqaha, they mention this example in their books. The vast majority of the scholars, they mention it's permissible, this kind of condition. And the Shaykh said this is a valid condition, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, that has to be fulfilled by the husband if he agrees to it, that means. Otherwise, she has the right to invalidate the marriage because he agreed. And we know the hadith al-Muslimun ala shurutihim. The Muslims are in accordance to their conditions. And I just cited the hadith earlier, the word these conditions to be fulfilled are those that make it legal for you to have sexual relations with the other person. Now, like I said, the majority of scholars, they permit this kind of condition. But does that mean that it's a condition that should be stipulated? Not necessarily. Because many women may stipulate the condition, and it's not a must for the husband to accept it. It's upon their agreement. So some of the ulama say it's not recommended to stipulate this because Allah made halal polygamy or polygyny. Whereas others, they say that it is permissible to stipulate it, but if the husband agrees, only then it's binding. Because it's also permissible for him not to agree. So they need to come to terms with these kind of conditions. That's an example. And we have to mention that if the condition is agreed to, it's binding. As the Shaykh said, the marriage will invalidate if it's nullified. And if the husband doesn't agree to it, then there is no condition binding then, because he didn't agree. Another example of a condition is that the wife or the woman stipulates to the suitor that he must not make her move from her hometown or her homeland. Thus the man, if he agrees, he's not allowed to take her outside, i.e. move her to another city, except with her permission. Because they stipulated this, maybe she likes her city where she lives, or she wants to be in the close proximity of her family, etc. So if the husband agrees, it's binding. It's very important to understand that if these agreements are stipulated, that they come to terms and they agree, or they communicate at the very least, not hiding these conditions. As often these conditions are not discussed, and later on, these to become mashakil, discussions and issues that are raised. Because if they were concerning to one of the two parties, they should have mentioned it beforehand. Likewise, another example, he says, stipulating a certain amount for the dowry, or that it be paid in certain currency, etc. Umar Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu authentically reported that he was asked, when he mentioned this discussion, a man said that they, the women, if the case is that we have to fulfill their conditions every time that they stipulate them, then the woman may divorce us. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu then said, the judgment on rights is based upon the stated conditions. And what he means by that is that the rights of the husband and the rights that he has are there in Islam, but they will be circumvented, i.e. they will be overlooked if he can agree to a condition stipulated earlier. So it's not enough for him to agree, for example, to a condition, and then on just invalidate it because he felt like it, and say it's my right to do what I want. I didn't know. Al-Muslimun ala shurutihim. You agreed. And that's why the conditions are very important that they be discussed in the beginning, if there are any, and that they be agreed upon, and they be something which is documented. Because these conditions, then they can have heavy weight on the validity of the marriage. And we'll continue as the Shaykh continues. And he mentions, Imam Ibn Qayyim says, rahimahullah, Such conditions must be kept as they are the worthiest to be fulfilled according to the principles of the Sharia. Reasoning and sound analogical deduction. Hence, if the woman does not consent to give herself to someone except on a certain condition, such a condition must be fulfilled. Otherwise, the marriage contract will not be established on her consent, and it will make her liable for uncalled for duties that are not enjoined on her by Allah and His Messenger ﷺ. So the bottom line is, even in the Quran we see that conditions in marriage are there. Musa ﷺ, when he married the wife of the old man from Midian, Surah Qasas, chapter 28, verse 27, he said that I will marry. He said, indeed I wish to marry one of my two daughters to you. For what? على أن تأجرني 8 حجج فإن أتممت 10 فمن عندك وما أريد أن أشق عليك ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصالحين. So he said that you served me for 8 years, but if you complete 10 years, it will be as a favor from you. And I do not wish to put you in difficulty. You will find, if Allah wills, from the righteous. Here is clear evidence in the Quran that Musa ﷺ accepted that condition, and a stipulation of conditions in the marriage contract is permissible, and that is for the maslahah of the one stipulating. And it's allowed for the man to stipulate also some conditions if he has as well. For example, that he would need this and this and this. So that's why it's important in the beginning, if a suitor and the woman agree that they want to get married, that they should have a conversation about the conditions prior to the marriage, so that there is no confusion. If these conditions are very important, that they be discussed. Another example would be a woman stipulating to her husband that she wishes to work. This is a very important one nowadays, a very common one. A woman may have in her mind that she wishes to work as she began working, or maybe she's working prior to the marriage. If the husband agrees, it's important that she continue to work, then it's not allowed for him later to deny that. It's very important people are listening. If he agrees in the beginning that she is allowed to work, he agreed to that, and then later on he cannot tell her, okay, now you can't work, because he agreed, and it's a sharat. But let's say they did not agree, and they got married, and then now she wants to get married. Now she wants to go to work. In that case, the ulama say that it's not allowed for her to do that unless they both agree, and it's in line with the conditions or with their family and their role and the huquq that each has over the other. So it's really important for the women to understand it as well, because if she wants this condition, they should be discussed beforehand. And likewise, if there is no agreement, then later on for her to want to work must be in agreement to both parties. The husband has to agree to that and consent to it, because he has haqq over her to work in the household. It's very important. Just like it wouldn't be allowed for him to change his huquq that she has over him just because. So this is an important point that needs to be communicated. And the ulama, they give many examples of that. The example, some of the fuqaha in their books of fiqh, like in the books of the Hanabila, for example, they mentioned that if the woman they didn't already discuss that she can, if they agree to, when they get married, to work, provided it does not negate her rights, the rights that he has over her. Because once she gets married now, that she has a different role or certain huquq she has to fulfill alongside whatever else she wishes to achieve. So it's important. If this is a situation that is there, they should discuss it beforehand. It's very important. It's not allowed that if a woman, for example, wanted to work, and the husband understood that he wanted her to not to work, they should have had that conversation beforehand. So these are examples of conditions that if they are there. Then there's some invalid conditions. And invalid conditions are of two types. One group of invalid conditions are those that invalidate the condition is invalidated and the marriage. Okay, some conditions, they're invalid themselves and the marriage. And we spoke about this in the Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya lessons, but we'll give an example. For example, the woman stipulates to her husband, or it's stipulated by the woman that she's going to get married to him if X, Y, and Z future event happens. It's not stipulation that's existing, because future events is not in our hands. We don't know. So you can't hinge the marriage on a future event that might happen. If that happens, then we get married. Now the condition's invalid, and the marriage wouldn't go through just like that. Another example, a man marries a woman who is divorced irrevocably, and the man only married the woman in order to make her permissible for his first wife. So that was the agreement. For example, the man was married to her for that agreement. That's invalid. So there's only a limited amount of those. The most cases, if a valid condition, in most cases, it could be that if the condition is invalid, but the marriage is valid. And that's many examples. Example, they got married with the condition, let's say, the Sheikh says, Sheikh Fawzan, that they both got married with the condition that the woman will not get a dowry from the husband. Let's assume this. Is the nikah batil or sahih? Correct opinion, it's valid. However, the condition is batil, because you have to give the mahar. It's clear? So those kind of conditions that exist, if they go against what we call the benefit of the marriage in and of itself, then it's not valid. If it's for the maslahah, the benefit of one of the two parties to which they want to secure that benefit, then it's still valid. And the origin is that their conditions are generally valid, except otherwise proven. And the scholars, we said before, they debated a lot of these things, because some of them thought that some of the conditions can encroach on the validity of the marriage or the benefit of the marriage if there's conditions. But some said no, the origin is a condition allowed to be made, provided that one party or the other party is looking for their benefit, and if the other party agreed to it, then that's it. And so if there is dispute about them, then it should be risen to the people of knowledge in order to discuss whether or not the condition was valid, or whether or not the condition must be fulfilled. And so we finish with this point number 4, section number 4, 4.0, that conditions of marriage must be discussed prior to the marriage. It should not be later on that they had different types of conditions and nobody discussed it. Tayyib. With that being said, we move now to 4.1. Now that we understand that the two parties have agreed to get married, they've stipulated any conditions that they may have, now is the time for them to decide upon mahar, a dowry. Now what's important is that coming into the marriage, before the contract happens, conversations like this are allowed to be done. i.e., the two parties can speak on the phone or in the house of the woman or whatever they wish, with the presence of the wali, the guardian, in order to communicate and discuss these issues. And this is an additional point that some of the scholars discuss. What's the ruling upon two people, i.e. the man and woman, who are not yet married, but they are in the proposal stage? What's the ruling on them talking on the phone or in social media, or what do you call it, the computer or stuff like this? The ulama, many of them said it's not allowed because they're still strangers to one another. Some of them permitted it if it's done in need, i.e. just to communicate certain necessary things, and to further their actual nikah, it's actually related to the marriage. So, with that being said, they all agreed, the scholars, it should be done preferably in the presence of the wali. Yani if they're talking on their phone and the wali can hear them, i.e. it's on speaker, that's fine. It's the best. Or they meet together with the wali again and they talk about certain details. That's the best. But talking on the phone without it, most of us scholars are not in favor of it, even though some have allowed it, because it's easy to go from the topic at hand to some other topics which are not necessary. At any time in the stage of the proposal, or in the engagement, some people call it, and truth be told, engagement is just a promise to get married. There's no such thing in Islam as an engagement as a formal practice. What we know in Islam is the proposal and the acceptance, which is like and a promise, and then the aqd itself, the real contract, which is the marriage. So some people mistakenly think, and all the ulama warn against this, that people think that once a man and woman have agreed to get married, now they're like as if they're married. They can go out one another, they can go shopping together, they can stay over one another's houses. Haram. It is not allowed that at all, because they're not married yet. If they wish to continue to that level, they must do the aqd first, to which then they are married. But in that middle period, these topics can come up so they can agree upon them, because they need to have this stuff agreed upon. Otherwise, they may have certain consequences later. And the mahar is one of those such topics. In relation to the mahar, we'll first talk about the wisdom. What is the wisdom? So the ulama, they mention that the wisdom behind the mahar, the dowry, there is actually a few benefits from it. And the reason why we need to start off with the wisdom is so often we hear the non-Muslims, when talking about the mahar, the dowry, that they talk about it in the wrong terms. The non-Muslims themselves, they used to have the condition or the quality and the practice of giving dowries. And they used to call it the bride price, the bride's price. And this is wrong terminology and Islamic. In Islam, we don't believe in a bride's price, because you're not buying the woman. You can't put a value on a woman, a righteous woman or woman. We can't. You can't put a value. So what it is a gift. It's not a price. So first we must make tasheeh, correction of our language. The disbelievers, when they use this terminology, they often use this in negative connotation in order to raise questions about the Islamic method or any culture that gives the dowry, because they themselves used to do this, and truth be told, they were the ones who used to sell their brides. They're the ones, as we know traditionally, historically, they're the ones who used to engage in wife selling. In Islam, haram, it's absolutely categorically prohibited. So language is very important, which then raises the question, if it's not a bride's price, what exactly is the mahar? It's a gift. كما قال الله تعالى في سورة النساء. Allah says in Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse number 4. وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة. وآتوا النساء صدقاتهن نحلة. And give the women their bridal gifts graciously. Our brothers and sisters, we need to understand this. This is where, as Islam, we always need to appreciate our Sharia. By knowing the hikmah at times, the wisdom, we have to make jama', combine between dalil wa ta'lil, evidence and reasoning. Why? Because these questions come up. If someone thinks, the mahar is a price the man pays in order to be with the woman, what do you mean by that? Yes, the ulama, the fuqaha, the jurists, a lot of them mention that the mahar is in exchange for the right for intimacy and nearness. Many of them mention this. So some people think that it's just transactional. He gives the mahar, she gives herself to him, khalas. This is it? No, this is not that's not it. Even though we have this in the books, because if you look at it from a transactional side, huquq, it's her haq to receive the mahar, dowry, in exchange for what? His haq to her being his wife, and intimacy with her, aloneness, etc. But that doesn't mean that's it. So Allah says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلًا, and give the women their bridal gifts graciously, or give the women, give the women their mahar with a good heart. The ulama then explain, like Imam Waliullah Dahlawi in Hujjatullah al-Baligha, the conclusive argument of Allah. He says in there, when he discusses the benefit of the mahar, he mentions that the mahar itself is something which is given. Why? In order to help create mu'awana, ad-da'ima. So essentially, the mahar is a type of gift that's given to help give or provide assistance, long-lasting assistance for the woman, i.e. something is given to her that's in her hand now that she can rely upon if she needs it. That's one. And later he mentions as well that the mahar itself is also a way يتحقق التمييز بين النكاح والسفاح. It's a way to differentiate. It's important to differentiate between the Islamic marriage and an affair. Yani in Islam, is not allowed to have an affair. Affairs and people today in our societies, they have a secret affair with a woman or a woman with a man. They're hiding something. In Islam, there is no such thing. The Rasulullah ﷺ encouraged us to make our nikahs open and public for that reason, that things become clear. We know who got married. He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, أشهد النكاح أشهد النكاح هذا النكاح لا السفاح. Witness the marriages. Witness the marriages. Because this is marriage, not an affair. And not something secret, illicit, haram relationship. And that's a fa'idah we see. فرق بين نكاح والسفاح. Sifah is the secret business people do, the hiding, the haram relationship to keep them down low. And what's the sign of it? It's hiding. It's hidden. Nikah, open. Rasulullah another hadith said, when it comes to the marriage, to announce it, publicly announce the marriages and witness them, right? Why? Because unlike in Jahiliyyah, where they used to do the secret affairs, this is Islam. It's open. We're not doing hidden stuff anymore. So here he says then, Ad-Dahlawi rahimahullah, from this angle, Al-Nabi he obligated the mahar. It's very interesting. See that different because you're openly giving a gift to a woman, showing clearly we're getting together and we're witnessing the marriage. Whereas the secret gatherings, or i.e. the girlfriend, boyfriend, the illicit relationships, hidden, no mahar, wala shay. Another thing the ulama they mention, others they mention, is a way to show honor for the woman. وَالرَّغْبَةِ and love and desire for her. Because he's giving her a gift, because he wants to marry her and he's honoring her and he's coming to her in this honorable way. And if we remember what we mentioned before, giving gifts is something good in Islam. Rasulullah ﷺ told us if you give gifts, what happens? He said, Hadith Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu fi Sahih, Adab Mufrad, Tahadu Tahabbu. Tahadu Tahabbu. Give gifts to one another, love one another. Exchange gifts with one another, love one another. Then, if someone were to say, what's the wisdom behind the dowry? Another one of his wisdoms is by exchanging a gift from the suitor to the woman. It not only shows honor, open marriage, but engenders love. Because you give a gift, you love one another. Allahumma barak. That shows then it's a good start to generate the love between the two spouses. And again, the ulama mentioned more, but that will suffice us. So this is important to understand that. Then, if we understand the wisdom, what are the rulings regarding the mahar? We'll summarize them as following. First thing first, the mahar is the haqq of the woman. Is the haqq of the woman, as we mentioned, is not allowed to get married without one. As Allah commanded us to give the woman a mahar, فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً, and give them, Allah says, their compensation, i.e. the mahar, as an obligation. Surah An-Nisa, ayah 24. And here, if it's an obligation, it belongs to who? The woman. It doesn't belong to the wali, the father, and doesn't belong to the mother or to anyone else. So it belongs to her and is given to her. And it doesn't negate then that sometimes the mahar could be a maslahah for her and the family. It's permissible for the woman and her wali, her guardian, to stipulate something that's for both of them. I.e., it's a benefit for him and her. I.e., the wali and his daughter. And the proof we mentioned the story of Musa alayhi salam, because him marrying her, someone will say, what was the mahar? Musa alayhi salam would work for the old man from Midian. And that maslahah is for the woman or for the man? It's for both. Because by him tending to the sheep, he's benefiting the father and he's benefiting her by way of them having livelihood. So that's permissible. However, the haqq is in her hand. And therefore the scholars they discussed who decides the mahar. It's important. Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, our ulama, they discuss this, our fuqaha and our muhaddithun. Who decides the mahar? I.e., how much is it or what it is? Is it the suitor, the man? Is it the woman? Is it the wali? So first thing first, the scholars have, majority of them to say, from what not majority, but many of them, they say that it's in the consideration given to what the woman wants, i.e. what she asks for, and usually her and her wali will agree to what's in her best interest. Of course, she decides and he agrees, and they go then and they ask the suitor. So many ulama said the tahdeed, the amount of the mahar is decided by the woman, and her wali is there for consultation to agree with her and to help her decide that. What if they differ? I.e., the wali and the woman differ? Then some of the scholars say if they differ, then it's taken to authority, like a judge likes it, for them to decide upon the appropriate dowry for her. And that's especially in the cases where there was no agreement at all. They're not agreeing at all, they have to go to a higher power, i.e. authority, to help solve the dispute. But in reality, the truth is, because the matter is going in her hand, it's her decision. Another group of scholars said, no, it's actually in the hand of the suitor. And what they meant by that is that the one who's getting married, it's permissible for him. It's actually his haq to decide how much he can offer, and then it's upon her to choose from that which he offers. Why did they say this? Because if the woman decides the mahar, i.e. makes tahdeed, she decides how much it's going to be, then in cases she may decide for something the husband can't afford. That is the reality we have. A woman says, I need this many thousand. The husband, i.e. the man who was a suitor who came to her, who was mashallah very good maybe, he said, but I only have this much. Now they have a problem. And what's happening is that at times the mahar is being taken outside the ability of the man. Other times the man takes advantage of the woman and gives her less. So sometimes the extremes on both sides. Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah in Silsila Huda wa Nur, tape 593, he was asked this question: is there from the Sunnah practical, applicable evidence that a man is the one yuhaddid al-mahar li-zawjah, that is the man who decides the amount of the mahar for his wife? So Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah said, if the intent here of the tahdeed, what's intended here, tahdeed, i.e. the restricting and deciding, then what I understand from this is that the request usually comes from the wali of the daughter to the man, that this is what the amount that they need. If this amount is in accordance to what the suitor has, then there's no harm, right, in the amount that they decided. However, the Shaykh then says, and he proceeds then to mention that in truth, the amount that it should be decided upon, i.e. the amount that it should be decided upon, or that should be offered, it should be in line with that which the husband has. Because at the end of the day, it's the husband who's the one who he's going to be paying it. And the Shaykh proceeds in his discussion to discuss the proof for that. And he brings the proof of the man, the hadith we mentioned last week, of the woman who got married to the man for an iron ring. In this hadith, Rasulullah asked the man to give her something. Correct? To give her something. And the man said he doesn't have anything. So Rasulullah, هل عندك من شيء تصدقها? Do you have anything to give her? And why did Rasulullah to ask him, not her? He didn't ask her, what do you want? He asked him, what do you have? So then the Shaykh from that, he says, فَإِذَنْ هُوَ الَّذِي حَدَّدْ وَلَيْسَتْ الْمَرْأَةِ وَلَا وَلِي الْمَرْأَةِ. The Shaykh then said, based on this, in his view, it's the man who decides how much he can afford, not the wali, or the guardian, not the woman. And he mentioned another proof, which is the hadith we find when Abdul Rahman ibn Auf came to Medina, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he got married after migrating to Medina with the Muhajirun. He got married. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked him, what did you give her? He said, wazni nawatin, a date stone of gold. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then said, give her warima, if even with that one sheep. So here the Shaykh, Alhamdulillah, Shaykh Al-Bani concludes that from here, this is the way that it should be done. And if you look at what majority, or not majority, many of the scholars they hold, is that the man and the woman, they need to come to terms with something which the man can afford and the woman wants. So we have then two views. Most scholars, like I said, they are the view that it's the woman who decides and the wali agrees and then presents that to the suitor to offer to agree. But the problem we find also is that if they are not in line with one another, and that's why excessive muhur, excessive dowries are very common and not allowed in Islam. And that's because when you find that they both have differences. Now, if the man knows the woman has a certain standard of living, or she comes from a background where typically her family, they are wealthier, then he should already know that it's going to be a lot. But the problem we find is that in Islam, is it allowed for the woman to ask for exorbitant amounts of mahar? Rasulullah did not allow that. Hadith in Sahih al-Muslim. One day the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Hurairah, he asked an Ansari man, said, I had married a woman from Ansar. And the Prophet ﷺ said, how much did you give her in mahar? He said four awaiq, right? Which is a type of, uqayya is a type of, or ugayya, awaiq, it means an old measure. It's about 40 dirhams each. So 44 of those. So essentially, it's 4 by 40. So 160 odd dirhams. Rasulullah, he knew that the man didn't have much money. So he told him, Ala arba'i awaiq, you married her for 4 awaiq. This is as if you were going to scoop silver from the side of this mountain. Yani how difficult it's going to be for you to pay that. And so from here what we notice, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam discouraged, criticized for the husband to agree to mahar he can't afford. And we said just a minute or some time ago from the hadith Aisha, the sign of a good woman, taysiru sadaqiha. And this is actually the easiness of her mahar. Now another hadith comes and says, Rasulullah said, khayrul nikahi aysaruhu, or khayrul sadaq aysaruhu. The best of dowries or marriages is the easiest. Hadith Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud and Ibn Majah and others. And so in Islam, encouragement for a lighter dowry, this is the recommendation. However, what is the legality? Because someone would say then, who decides? Actually, then matters. The correct thing then, if you combine these evidences, is that a woman and her wali, they agree that which is in her favor to ask our mahar. But it should be in line with what the husband, the suitor can afford. Too often, women may ask amounts that he can't afford. And then it becomes a burden for him. And instead of engendering love, as you said, because you're giving a nihla, a gift, now it's a burden for him. And it brings resentment. And I'm going to explain how that is. The second extreme then will be a man encouraging the woman based on the hadith to give nothing. Because some people then say the sunnah is to give less, which is true. But what does less mean? The mashayikh, they criticize giving nothing, or giving nothing when you have a lot. For example, Shaykh Sulaymaan Ruhaili, he mentioned some of the Zahiriyya, the Zahiri madhab, some of them mention anything could be a mahar, even one grain of rice. And the Shaykh says that 1 grain of rice is not as if there is no mahar. This is not befitting. Because some people try to use the same hadith he cited, hadith Sahal bin Sa'ad. Nabi SAW told him, the man, to go to his house, فَالْتَمِسْ وَلَوْ خَاتِمًا مِنْ حَدِيدٍ وَلَوْ خَاتَمًا مِنْ حَدِيدٍ. Go to your house and check, even if you're going to find an iron ring. And so some people think that's the sunnah, to give just an iron ring or less, when he's capable of doing more. Then the correct opinion is between the two. The correct opinion is to be modest between the two. Not exorbitant or excessive, and not extremely low. The hadith of Sahal bin Sa'ad I just cited, ulama explained the hadith is for the one who doesn't have. Very important. Some of the brothers, they don't understand that. They think this is it. If you have a little bit more, you can give more, which is easy. Because what does it mean to be easy in mahar? Allama Munawi said, that which is already present in his hand, he can afford it. So it's something which he can afford and it's easy for him. And the woman should not feel that that's belittling her, because it's not a price for her. This is important. It's not paying you your price, your value. Women are invaluable. Well, it's a gift. And that which is done with barakah, unless it actually helps the marriage. And we're going to explain in a minute. But some brothers should know that it doesn't mean giving just less. For example, they said that the man he taught the Quran. So therefore it's sunnah just to teach the Quran. No. Because Rasulullah ﷺ and the Sahaba for the most part gave actual wealth. That's number one. Number two, Rasulullah ﷺ accepted for the dowry of Fatima. And this is very important. The dowry of Fatima is a very important kind of standard. Some of the scholars, they use the dowry of Fatima as a amount that should be fixed. And that's not correct either. You can't fix the mahar to that amount or less. The ulama said there's no proof for that. You can give more or less. But what did Rasulullah accept for Fatima? When Ali radiallahu ta'ala married her, he said, I don't have anything. He said, give her something. He said, I don't have anything. I don't have anything. He said, where's your shield? Where's your shield? And the shield, what's the worth of the shield? Some narrations come and show that it was worth very less, like the amount. It was not very high in price. Then, giving something is better. Shaykh Abdul Abadi says in Sharh Sunan Abi Dawood, tape 243, so he ﷺ made teaching her, that woman, teaching her the Quran as dowry, and it is not that the marriage is without a dowry, as an honor for him due to him memorizing something of the Quran. Shaykh Uthaymeen says in Sharh al-Mumta', volume 12, page 259, that is, if he gives her a dowry to teach the Quran, then this is valid. And this is because teaching is not the Quran itself. And he's teaching, that's what he's giving. Yes, if a person wanted to recite for our weights, then this is not allowed, because reciting the Quran is for righteous actions. But rather, the Shaykh says, however, this man wants to teach, and teaching the dowry. Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah mentions, however, this dowry does not suffice unless he is in need and is not capable of giving more wealth. And we explained in the beginning, if a woman is marrying a man who is poor, there's no wrong with that. But if he's going to give a dowry, that which she can afford. If he doesn't have much, she should understand that and accept. Now what if he has more? She can ask for more. And it's permissible for him to give more. But again, it should not be excessive. It should be something that is valid. What are some examples of mahar that can be given? The ulama, they mention some of those examples. For example, based on the hadith I just cited, Shaykh Uthaymeen, interestingly, in Sharh al-Mumta', he says, then is it permissible for a man to say, for example, I'm going to teach you Kitab al-Tawheed as a mahar? He says, Shaykh says, yes, because you're teaching. And that's a type of juhud. And that's again, if the woman wants this, if she wants this and she agrees to it. If she wants it. Again, if she doesn't want it and the wali is forcing it, it's not allowed. And it's not allowed to coerce the woman. She has to agree. She's asking, for example, for nothing, for very less, that's her choice. But she has the right to ask for wealth. It's not demeaning it, because the man is giving this is a gift to honor her and also for her own benefit. Shaykh gives other examples, the same thing, like if teaching Zad al-Mustaqna' or any other example. How about, for example, some of the scholars discuss, what about the woman asking for Umrah or Hajj as a mahar? It's very common, people do that. The permanent committee, they said it's permissible to do that, to ask for the price or pretty much the price of the travel and the event of Umrah. But it's important to put something into place, which is that the mahar, it should be given immediately. Mu'ajjal, not mu'ajjal. It should be given immediately, not delayed. And that's another problem that happens. Some cultures, they believe in the mahar, delayed mahar. The sunnah is the advanced mahar. Do not to delay anything. You give it immediately. Preferably before they move in together or they have intimacy. You give the mahar. And the proof is that the hadith of Sahl ibn Sa'ad, Rasulullah told him to go get a ring to give her. You give her something. Because when it comes to delayed mahar, a lot of times it never gets paid. And some cultures, they divide into two. For half here, half there. Half in the beginning, half at the end. And the half at the end never comes. It's upon condition of divorce. Which means the man never divorces. And so we find the woman doesn't get. In many cases that happens. And that's oppression. To deny her mahar. These are things that will come Yawm al-Qiyamah. If people don't give the mahar to the woman, which is her haqq. And the same is true then, that some women, they may argue, in today's time especially, that giving a large amount of mahar is good as a security, just in case a woman gets divorced. Because we said the mahar is going to help the woman. It's a gift. She might need it if she's divorced. And this logic sounds sound if you hear it on face value, but if you think deeply about it, it's not correct. And the ulama explain why. Because just like in Islam, a man has to give mahar, he has to also give furnishings for the house, for the accommodation. Correct? And we'll mention this later, but Nabi ﷺ used to help in the furnishing. He used to help in furnishing the house for Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu when he got married to Fatima. Before he sent Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha to the house of Ali, he furnished the house. Then, if he's going to help in the furnishing, why? So that the husband doesn't give, as Mashaykh mentioned, so much in the beginning, high mahar, high accommodation, high everything, and then he resents the woman because he gave everything. The more he gives, the higher his expectation is of her, because he's giving so much. It's not barakah now. Now it's becoming a burden. And then when the woman does not live up to his expectations, because she may make a mistake, or she's not as he imagined, immediately he will not tolerate it. Then how is that necessarily important? Where in Islam does it come this idea you have to secure yourself for the future? This is the feminist talk. And feminists, and I'll be very clear, in feminism, they encourage the woman to have her own income, her own wealth in preparation if the man were to divorce. In Islam, this is already factored in. We mentioned this in our classes on feminism before. That in Islam, that a man, if he were to divorce a wife, there is already assistance, spousal support in the Sharia that the man gives on her way out. On top of that, he takes care of her expenses. On top of that, i.e. when they're married, and on top of that, if she has her own money, he's not allowed to take. So the mahar is already a type of security. But lastly, the problem we have then is it's a two-way street. That if a woman asks for, I'm not saying excessive, I'm not talking about moderate, I'm talking about excessive. And excessive is in accordance to what the husband cannot afford. This is important. We're not saying that a certain amount of money which is reasonable. No, reasonable is reasonable. And it's a must upon the husband to offer reasonable things. But in the case of exorbitant or excessive amounts, out of the claim that in case she divorces, this then is a two-way street. If she then divorces and asks for khula', he needs to receive all of it back. And we don't hear that logic or rhetoric in the conversations. In Islam, a woman divorces a man, he needs all the mahar back, every cent of it. وحتى many of the Mashaykh even says, if they agree upon more, she has to give more. Obviously that's not something recommended, but it's there in the books. So what do we notice? If he gives a lot and things don't work, either from her end or his end, either she's going to give back. If she asks for divorce, all of it, so it's not really going to help her if she was trying to get secure. Or he gave a lot, and then what happens? He had too much expectations of her and resentment from all that he gave, that the marriage falls through instead of lasting. And that's why you may see the hikmah giving less is for barakah. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that. And last point is, just in case someone misunderstand this and say, then why then so emphasis on less? This is not right. The husband, if he gives less or larger dowry, he still has to take care of his wife. We need to factor in the reality. He's still going to take care of her the rest of it. So if he gives a lot of money or less money, he's still going to take care of her. So it's not like to say that he gave her so much and then he ran out of everything for the expenses. And we need to bring in the Islamic logic, because today's time we hear things on the internet and social media which are not kitab and sunnah. Every statement anyone brings must be weighed against the Quran and Sunnah or Fahm al-Salaf. If it is not in accordance to it, we don't take it. And I'm saying this clearly because in today's world, sad to say, on social media things trend which are not befitting, and we should ask a better question, which is, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? What did he teach? What did Sahabatul Kiram radhiyallahu anhum do? If we ask these questions, we'll get the answers. So the bottom line of all that we were saying, and we'll end with this much, is that the mahar should be a reasonable amount, not very less, and not excessive. Rather that which the husband can afford, and inshallah that will bring barakah to the household and will allow them to prosper. Next week we'll continue. Now, if they agreed upon a mahar, how much it may be, what's the next steps? And also in the case that they don't agree upon a mahar, then the ulama say, let's say they differed. In fact, they got married without explaining the mahar. Then they go to what's called mahar mithl. Mahar al-mithl, which means an equivalent, a mahar of equivalency, which means that a man and woman got married and did not cite or make mahar musamma, yani they didn't mention a mahar specifically, then a woman receives the amount, generally speaking, culturally speaking, a woman will get if she got married. And that's in the situation where they didn't agree, and later on, the woman asked the husband for the mahar, and he said, we didn't agree upon anything, and they don't agree upon anything, then they go to that. Yani they go there if they don't have anything that they've agreed upon. That's why it's preferable to agree beforehand so that later on they don't get into this kind of problem. Or if he passes away and the mahar wasn't given, how much should be taken to give from his wealth in order to give before the inheritance? How much should be given for her? It goes back to mahar and mithl, the equivalent mahar of equivalency, dowry of equivalency. And so the reality to decide the mahar beforehand is better, and to be agreed upon and to be reasonable, and each party should be speaking in good terms and reasonable amounts. Bi'idhnillah, we'll stop with this much. If anyone has any questions, we will take it. Wa illa, we will end. If someone mentions, I mentioned accidentally the wife of the old man, instead of the husband of the old man, I believe. Naam, yeah. So the story of Musa alayhi salam and the old man when he got married to the daughter of the old man. Naam, barakallahu feekum. Daughter of the old man, barakallahu feekum. Question said, does this suffice for the conditions to be verbal, or do they have to be written down? The best thing is to write them down in case that they dispute later about them. And that's why in the aqd, the actual contract, they should be written down. It's not a must. In Islamic law, the aqd doesn't even have to be written down, the contract. It can be all verbal, as Rasul Sahaba anhum got all married. They were all married verbally. But many of the scholars mentioned this, that it's permissible to write it, and maybe in today's time probably safer to do so, that in case they don't dispute later, that it's written down and signed upon and agreed. Because later some people may have a wrong imagination or understanding of what was agreed upon. So best to write them down, and usually within the aqd, the actual paper of the aqd, there's space for any condition that they have, so the parties, while they're doing the contract, they can sign on, all of them can agree to that. Inshallah. That's safer and better. Allah knows best. Any other questions? طيب, inshallah, if there's no more questions, next week, inshallah, we will go from the stage where now they have prepared for marriage to the next part, which is how the actual contract is conducted, to then the steps after that, which is the walima, the banquet, and the likes. طيب, جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.